Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Fatima Shitani, Brazilian Council General in LA, and I'm very proud and very happy to have Djamila Ribeiro amongst us. She had such a great event in Santiago, and now she's coming here, and it is with great honor that I introduce her to you. I mean, she doesn't need to be introduced. She's such a great person. Well, thank you very much for you all for coming here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I feel like Djamila Ribeiro hardly needs any introduction. She's perhaps one of the most important feminist philosophers of any race of any time. She has a master's from the Federal University of Sao Paulo, but what's very interesting is her own biography, which is not, as you might imagine, a conventional one. Her family was part of both the Black liberation movement and trade union movements within Brazil, within southern Brazil, and in Santos, which was a very active environment. It's not been easy. She spent time being a faxineira, cleaning up after things, but had also realized the incredible importance of transforming Black voices and also the voices of women more generally, but not within the confines of the way that this is normally conceived of. I'll let her explain what she's going to do. She can do it much better than I am able to do. But what's important is that while of course she has been extremely influential through her own books and writings, but she's also been very important in terms of expanding the access of Black writers, Black voices, and other kinds of languages into the published sphere. So she's kind of transformed a large part of Brazilian publishing. Let me just give you a few of the awards that she has received. She's a lifetime member of the Academy of Literature of Sao Paulo. She was the Assistant Secretary for Human Rights in Sao Paulo in 2016. She was the laureate of the 2019 Prince Claus Award, awarded by the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which supports artists and cultural practitioners in countries where the culture is under pressure. And as you might remember, this was the period of the Bolsonaro regime. In 2019, she was one of the BBC's list of one of the most inspiring and influential women. And in 2021, she was honored by the BET Awards granted by the Black community. Her book, which is right there, so you can snag one, just came out in Yale University Press, called in English, Where We Stand. I'm going to pass the word to my colleague who will place her in a little bit more of an intellectual context. Djamila will give a presentation and then we open it up to you. So,
Thank you so much.
sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nora Vieta, Assistant Professor of Spanish and Portuguese Economy here at UCLA. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to Djamila Ribeiro for coming to have this conversation at UCLA. And thank you to the units, centers, departments, and individuals who made this gathering possible. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Djamila Ribeiro, although she doesn't need introductions. An accomplished journalist and philosopher, Ribeiro has written extensively on the intersections between citizenship, rights, gender, and race. Those of us who have followed Brazil's cultural life over the last decade know of Ribeiro's commitment to the public debate on racism and women's rights. As someone conscious of what it means to be involved in this struggle, Ribeiro has not been afraid to take her debates to different spheres, to the classroom as a university professor, the media as an intellectual and public functionary, or the publishing industry as an editor. She has been a protagonist of the multiple transformations driven by the struggles of the Brazilian Black movement and the politics of affirmative action. Along with a generation of Black Brazilian intellectuals, activists, artists, scholars, Ribeiro has confronted some of the discourses that build Brazil as a nation and the patriarchal, racist, and extractivist nature of these discourses. Now, when looking at Ribeiro's endeavors as an intellectual and editor, one could say that her efforts are defined by a will to communicate. This genuine interest, the will to communicate, is embodied in the book she comes to present to us today, Lugar, fala, Where We Stand, published by Yale University Press. If there is something that distinguishes this book, and Chimamanda Adichie mentioned it in her foreword, it is the clarity that Ribeiro uses to discuss some categories of feminist thinking with a wider audience. Responding to this will to communicate, Where We Stand belongs to a material project, a real project that collectively envisions to transform the publishing industries in Brazil. Ribeiro is the coordinator of Feminisms Plurais, which includes the FAS Feminisms Plurais, an online platform, and the publishing label Sueli Carneiro, that has brought to life the first works of a great variety of Black Brazilian authors. But also, as part of this will to communicate, Where We Stand book opens itself to a conversation with those who came before. Ribeiro takes up a Black feminist tradition, a long tradition that she names and acknowledges from the very first sentence of her book. Where We Stand convenes a gathering of Black feminist thinking, the Brazilian Leila Gonzalez and Sueli Carneiro, the US Sojourner Truth and Angela Davis, or the Portuguese Grada Quilombo. As part of his will to communicate, Where We Stand offers this gathering to the reader, to us as readers. In a country, the United States, that publishes an almost insignificant percentage of translation each year, let us take this opportunity as a beautiful invitation to open ourselves to conversations with the strong, long, and diverse traditions of Black feminist thought from Brazil, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Please join me in welcoming Djamila Ribeiro to UCLA.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the Brazilian consulate for all the support, and here the Department of Spanish and Portuguese for organizing this event. Thank you so much for your introduction. Well, I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the Brazilian contest, so I'd like maybe to share a little bit about. In Brazil, in Brazil, there is the largest Black diaspora in the world. We are about 100 million people, 100 million Black people in Brazil. So in Brazil, we are Black America. But usually people do not know about our critical reflections because, as my colleague brilliantly said, the editorial market here in the United States can be a challenge for us because here they translate only 3% of books per year, 3%. So, and when you come from Brazil, thinking in Brazilian Portuguese, in the only country in South America where Portuguese is the official language, the barriers can be harder for us because even in South America, we are kind of isolated because of the language. So at the same time that Brazil is a continent, because Brazil is a huge country, 200 million people, a diversity of culture, accents in Brazil. At the same time, we are an island because of the language. And unfortunately, we are not learning English or Spanish as second language in Brazil. So there are incredible authors in Brazil, Afro-Brazilian authors that people do not know because the um, politics of translations are still colonial politics. In Brazil, I was part of a movement to translate US Black authors in Brazil. So in 2016, we are able to translate Women, Race and Class of Angela Davis. I remember in 2015 sending the email to Angela Davis, invite her to publish her book there. It's interesting because this book was originally published in the United States in 1981, but only in 2016 it was published in Brazil due to the work of Black women in Brazil. And then we translated Patricia Lee Collins, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde. I organized the book of Audre Lorde, I'm Your Sister. And today in Brazil, currently in Brazil, there are a lot of US Black authors translated in Brazil. But the movement of exchange doesn't happen when it comes to translate Brazilian Black authors in the United States. So, of course, I'm glad to be translated here. I'm translated by Yale University Press, and I thank Yale University Press for making my work available in English. But there are a lot more of people that should be translated into English. I'm teaching currently at NYU as a guest professor. I'm teaching about feminism from the South. It's my first time living abroad. I'm enjoying this opportunity, this experience a lot. But at the same time, it's a challenge for me when I'm going to teach about Brazilian authors because I have to translate myself some parts of the text and I have to find videos in English. And it's so hard. And my students, they are so amazed by the work of these women, but still their books are not available. So it's important in the United States to people here to start this movement that we started in Brazil to translate Black authors there, because it's impossible to talk about racism ignoring the largest Black diaspora in the world, ignoring the fight of the Black liberation movement in Brazil, ignoring our diversity of being Black in Brazil and the different definitions of being Black that we bring to the discussion. So to begin is that it's important to people to really try to know more about the Brazilian context beyond the stereotypes, because usually people know just about stereotypes about Brazil. It's can be exhausting sometimes being a Brazilian woman in the global north. When people ask you, where are you from? And you say, I'm from Brazil. Oh, Brazil. Brazil. You're like, what? You know? Oh, Brazil. So they samba for us. And I say, well, don't get me wrong. I love samba. I love carnival. But you don't ask people to dance samba. People don't know, you know. So, or just stereotypes of Brazil. So it's important to people, especially people who are in academia, to try to create kind of bridges with with Brazil and Afro-Brazilian intellectuals and activists. So where we stand was my first book that was published in Brazil in 2017, originally published in Brazil, Lugar de Fala. And this book was the first book of the Plural Feminism collection that I organized in Brazil, in which I publish Black authors from different perspectives. So I had to publish myself first to gain attention of other publishing houses in Brazil. So today I'm a bestseller. Today, currently, I am being published by the major published house in Latin America. But before I had to publish myself in order to have this kind of recognition. I had to be part of this movement to try to change the editorial market in Brazil, because until 2014 in Brazil, 90% of the books published in Brazil until 2014 were written by white people in a country where 56% of the population is black. So until 2014, the editorial market in Brazil was still very while male dominated. So that's why I decided to create this book seal in order to publish not only my work, but the work of other Black intellectuals. It's an independent project. It was really hard in the beginning to be able to establish this initiative, but I'm glad to say that currently in Brazil, most of the authors that have been published are quite popular in our country right now. And also, I decided to make the project international. My first translation was into French in 2019. I have 4 books translated into French, 2 books translated into Spanish, 3 books translated into Italian, and 1 book translated into German. But when the French published house invited me to translate my work, I said, it's not only about me, it's about this project. So we made a partnership. All the books that I published in Brazil, I sent to her. Her name is Paula Nakaona, and she see if it makes sense for the French contest. And until today, there are 7 books from feminists, plural feminist collections translated into French. 7 books. And all these authors had the opportunity to go to France to present their work. And 3 were published into Italian. Because for me, it's important to make the project international. And I hope that here in the United States, you can have this kind of partnership to make the work of these authors available in English as well. Lugar de fala is a concept that in 2014, 2015 were quite popular in Brazil, especially on social media. And I decided to write about this concept because I was following maybe empathy discussion on social media, mostly because this concept was coined by Black women. I didn't coin the concept. What I did in my work was to trace a genealogy of the concept, to try to understand the concept. The concept of speaking place, né? Lugar de fala, lugar de enunciação. The translation into Spanish, I think it's more accurate in lugar de enunciación. Yeah, I really enjoyed this translation. Again, the concept of speaking place was not coined by me. What I did in my book was to trace a genealogy of the concept. We believe it's rooted in critical race theory and feminist studies, particularly standpoint theory. An example I like to give that explains the concept well is the idea of giving voice. It's very common for white people or people in power to say they are giving a voice to minority groups. And this idea is problematic because it assumes that they inherently have the voice and give it to others when they want or feel like it. They treat this privilege as something natural, rather than understand that this privilege was socially constructed. So in the first instance, thinking about speaking place means discussing the social mechanisms that produce inequalities. When people in power believe they are giving a voice to minority groups, what happens when these historically marginalized people say something they don't like or something that causes discomfort? They will stop being given the voice. The issue is that we Black women have always spoken. the question that should be posed is different. Why is his voice not being heard? And oftentimes, these voices are not heard because they come from a social position marked by deep inequalities. So, this is the meaning of speaking place, the social locus, the social location of the groups. So, if we focus on the social condition that construct such groups, it's not an individual discussion as usually people can understand. Another example that I like to give. A white novelist can describe one of his characters as, for example, a sailor who loves the sea and nature and enjoys being with his family. He doesn't feel the need to point out that this character is white because, from a colonial perspective, being white is synonymous with humanity. However, if he were to describe a black character, he would likely mark that character as, for example, a black fisherman who lives in a coastal town and works every morning. He believes the sailor is universal and the fisherman is specific. So, speaking place is also a way to refuse this idea of universality and to mark the white subject as white, affirming that he speaks from a place as well. The place of power, the place of privilege. So he is also specific, even believing he is universal, and that he speaks from a place of power and privilege. This position grants him a limited worldview because thinking about the world solely from his own social position leads to a narrow view of reality. So, speaking place is not about you say, but about the place you speak from. It's common location within hierarchical power relations that create groups, not the results of collective decision making of individuals within the groups. Another example, the great Black Brazilian intellectual and feminist Lélia Gonzalez argued that Brazilians speak Portuguese, something like English. That is a form of Portuguese influenced by various African and indigenous languages. And often people can speak Portuguese, but aren't even aware of it and may mock someone they perceive as speaking incorrectly, while they themselves speak in a colloquial manner typical of Portuguese and use words that originated from African languages without knowing their origin. Brazil was colonized by Portugal, but the Portuguese we speak in Brazil is very different. Many linguists argue that we speak a Brazilian Portuguese. Lélia emphasized the importance of recognizing the role of Black people in shaping Brazil beyond the position of the discriminated. Even if a white person is unaware that he or she speaks Portuguese, this linguistic influence does not cease to exist. But he or she may continue not knowing because they come from a position that legitimizes knowledge produced from a white-centered perspective. Thus, the position of power is also a position that allows for ignorance, which many invoke when confronted. Gonzalez continued her reflection by pointing out how Afro-Brazilian culture is the one elevated by the official discourse and is called Brazilian culture. For example, carnival, samba, caipirinha, feijoada, Pelé. Outside of Brazil, people often cite these examples, even if they are stereotypical. Brazil is a vast country with continental dimensions, and huge cultural diversity. But these are usually the examples people give. Feijoada was created by enslaved Black people. Slave owners kept the noble parts of the pig and threw the scraps to the enslaved. From the scraps, they created the most famous dish of Brazilian cuisine. Gonzalez argued that Brazilian society was neurotic because it continued to discriminate against and deny rights to the Black population while simultaneously appropriating their culture and turning it into a national symbol. A white person may go through life unaware of the origins of these cultures, may love samba, but be against affirmative actions policies for Black population, may parade in carnival and still oppose anti-racist policies. Because from their social position, they believe they can continue to ignore how society is hierarchically structured. In this sense, speaking place is also an ethical stance. How can my social position positively impact other places? In the same way, this white person may not understand how ignorance also harms him or her. Speaking place is based on standpoint theory and intersectionality. A poor white person may have experiences in common with a rich white person from the position of whiteness, but these experiences will be different in terms of class. Instead of confronting the rich people in power to gain rights, a poor white person is more likely to confront anti-racist policies for Black people or immigrants, believing that these policies are what prevents them from having rights, rather than the measures taken by those in power. As Simone de Beauvoir, the French philosopher, in her monumental book, The Second Sex, states, a poor white person may look at their neighbor and say, at least I'm not Black, even though their class experiences are closer to their Black neighbor than to a rich white person. Ignorance of the origins of oppression causes certain groups to fight with other marginalized groups and blame them for their situations instead of confronting those in power. However, it's important to point out that if this poor white person managed to rise socially, he or she will easily be accepted into the world of whiteness as power. They won't be questioned by store clerks about whether they can afford a bag or not, and they won't be followed by security in stores. The books they were exposed to protect white people as synonymous with humanity. They were exposed to protect white people as synonymous with humanity, and they will feel part of the world without difficulty. The same does not happen with a Black person who rises socially. This person will likely be in the minority in space of power, will have to deal with the discomfort their presence causes, and will continue seeking and creating a world that restores their humanity. Standpoint theory teaches that experiences are different based on our social position. What matters here is understanding the shared experiences, not focusing on individual experiences. What are the experiences that Black women are sharing as a group? White people who only study other white people and only read from their own social group end up with an impoverished, limited view of the world, even if they think they are being universal. So it's important to professors and teachers to review their reading list, to review their epistemological foundations. Because of this statement, some people ask me often, do I have to read a white woman author just because she's a white woman? Or do I have to read this black author just because he's black? I read people's works regardless of color, they might say, while continue to read only white authors. However, the question is being asked incorrectly. The real question to ask is, if Black indigenous people are part of the society and they write books, produce intellectual work, why aren't these people and their works being studied? If they are part of the formation of society and continue to be left out, it means the story is being told incompletely. So, and when you do the relation with the global north and global south, it's the same kind of thinking, same kind of thought. If we in Brazil, in the global south, we are writing books and thinking and bringing different perspectives to the discussion, why are these discussions not being part of bibliography in the global north? So it means that the story is not being told the way it should be. And again, if we as Brazilians, if we as Black people in Brazil, the country that there is the largest Black population in the world, we are only behind Nigeria. If you are there thinking the world, why are not our intellectual work being part of the discussion? So, and to end, I'd like to say that again, speaking place is not about you say, but the place you speak from. So it's important for white people to discuss racism as well. The thing is that white people will discuss from a different place. Because sometimes you can hear people saying, oh, I'm not going to talk about racism because it's not my speaking place, or I don't have a speaking place. Everybody has a speaking place. And when we are talking about oppression, we are talking about relation. If there are groups being oppressed, are groups that are oppressing. So it's important for that groups who are being historically benefited by the oppression to be able to understand the oppression, to not treat that oppression as natural, and to be able to use the speaking place as an ethical instance to create the changes we believe are important for our societies. So to ask the question, from my speaking place, what can I do to impact in a positive way other places different from mine? And also to understand that it's important to these people not to put themselves as the norm, as everybody else differs from. Because it's common to people to say, you are different from me, but not acknowledging that this person is also different from me. We are mutually different. It's important also to question the concept of difference and to understand that this concept needed to be understood in the sense that everybody is different from everybody. Instead of put themselves as the norm and put the others as the others. So if you are different from me, you do not share the same kind of humanity that I have, the same kind of work that I am part of. So we also can learn from other people. We can teach and you can learn. This movement of exchange, it's necessary. And it happens when I look to other person or to other groups and recognize their humanity and to be able to put myself in this place of acknowledging the world from different perspectives than mine, because this kind of attitude enriches our worldview. I like to give this example to finish. When I was in Brazil in 2015, I was in the north of Brazil, in Belém, and I was there holding a talk at University of Pará. And I remember that was there talking about how happy I was to be in the north of Brazil, and I'm here in the north, and the north this, the north that. And then at one moment, the woman who was with me sharing the conversation, she stopped it and asked me, "What are you talking about, Djamila? Which north are you talking about? Are you talking about Pará, Acre, Amazonas? Which north are you talking about? Because when I ask you where you come from, you say you come from São Paulo, even though you come from the Southwest. But you don't mark yourself coming from the Southwest, right?" And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So not a good feeling. We are talking for, I don't know, 200 people. And I was like, yes, she's right. What am I talking about? Yes, I come from São Paulo, and usually in Brazil, people who come from São Paulo, they think they are superior. And São Paulo and Southwest, people as São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Espírito Santo, Minas Gerais, but usually in Southwest, we only talk about São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And of course, for me, it was a shock. And I could have write myself in the ignorance. I could, say, "Oh, why are you talking to me like that?" Yeah. But I decided to just say, "Yes, you're right. I don't know anything. You're right. It's the first time that I am here in the North. What do I know about the North? First time I'm here. I don't know nothing, but I want to learn." And I did that. So I decided to travel around the country to really know my country, because usually Brazilian people, they don't know Brazil. They don't know. They go to Salvador and say, I went to the Northeast, Salvador, Bahia. But you have Maranhão, you have Piauí, Rio Grande do Norte, different states, different cultures, different accents. So I decided to travel around Brazil, and it was so important to me to do that, because I learned a lot from different cultures, and I have the opportunity to meet different authors. And then I invited these authors to publish in my book, Silk. So otherwise, I would publish only people from São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. So it's important to us to be open and to understand that from our social position, it's important to us to be able to know the other social positions. It's important to us to be able to understand that the world is not about us. It's not about only the place we come from. And in a country like Brazil, so diverse, so rich, when I did that, it enriched my worldview. And for sure, today I'm a more interesting person than I used to be, because now I know about that. And I put myself in the place of listening, because if there is a speaking place, it's important to other people to listen to the others. And usually you do not put ourselves in this place of listening. And because we try all the time to impose our perspective, comes from our social position. So if there is a speaking place, it's necessary to have a listening place as well, to be able to have different perspectives and a multiplicity of voices enriching the debate. I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a beautiful presentation. I think that I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm in the table to start with one question, and we can open after that to the conversation. And I'm very happy that you ended up with this idea of the listening place, because I was thinking a lot about that when I was reading your work, and always that I'm listening to you. So I was thinking, like, we definitely can see that projects like yours have changed the publishing market in Brazil. Um, I remember that I was in Brasilia recently in the summer, and I went to this bookstore, and I come out from the bookstore just like with books by Black Brazilian writers, and it is because there was a lot uh, showing there. So I think that there's something happening. And as someone who works with contemporary and visual arts, we can also say that we have seen like some kind of change in museums in Brazil and also in other places of the diaspora in the last years. So, because you are always thinking ahead, I'm thinking like, I would like to ask if you are having like any ideas on how we gonna like to keep this pace, even if those are like small changes, how are we gonna do like to maintain maybe the places, and that takes actually the that takes into account the fact that we have like to okay how the other people is listening and how that listening is gonna be converted into transformations that gonna stand in the structure of society. So I'm thinking a little bit about that. Also, like what is the next steps? In terms of this, you are now like changing the publishing market in Brazil. How are we gonna keep in that path? And the second question is about the fact that you are right now a visiting professor here at NYU, right? And I was wondering how like being based in the States is like nurturing your thinking, about the connection between academia and feminisms and activism, something that you have been doing all the time, right? And this is changes between the North and the South, or we call the North and the South. Those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. I think if Brazil now um, you can actually see more Black people in their places. It's important to say that it's because of the affirmative actions in Brazil and public policies in terms of education. So in 2001, the State University of Rio de Janeiro was the first university to adopt cotas in Brazil. In 2003, the second one was the State University of Bahia, and 2004, the University of Brasilia. And then 2012, it was established the federal cota law under Dilma administration. So for sure, all these policies were very important to give access to Black people to university. I was part of this public policy. I was the first person in my family to go to university due to public policies in terms of education. I studied in a campus that was founded in 2017, and I am of the 2018 class of philosophy. So for sure, all these movements in Brazil, and of course the Black Liberation Movement, fought for that to establish this kind of affirmative actions were very important. That's why I was able to organize a book seal because I had the opportunity to go to university and to break this exclusion cycle. Because after the slavery time in Brazil, Brazil was the last country in America to abolish slavery. The last country in America in 1888. And after the slavery time in Brazil, what you call the industrialization process, there were not any kind of public policy to integrate Black people. So for a long, long time, we were being prevented to have access to education in Brazil. So an example, in my family, my mom, before marrying my father, she was a domestic worker, and my grandmother, my great grandmother, and before them, they were enslaved. So these public policies were very important in Brazil to break this exclusion cycle. Of course, yeah, there is still a long way to go, but it was very important. And under Bolsonaro administration, of course, he disenfranchised a lot of these policies, so it was hard time in Brazil. But the federal quota law completed 10 years under Bolsonaro administration because it was established for 10 years. So we were very afraid of that Bolsonaro couldn't renew the policy, but then Lula won the election, and one of his first action was to renew for more 10 years. So we know that for the next 10 years in Brazil, there will be affirmative actions not only for Black people, but actually for poor people in Brazil. So we know that it's going to maintain these policies if we keep it. But of course, we are living in Brazil now. I think in the entire world, there's advance of extreme rights in Brazil. In the last elections in the city level, the results were very frightening in Brazil. But I think that because of these policies will be kept, it will be very important for us to continue to have access to higher education. But to continue to do that, I think it's, I don't know, to maintain that or to advance that, we have to keep fighting. There is no choice for us as Black people, as Black women in Brazil. There are very important initiatives in Brazil that comes from Black women and Black people, indigenous people as well. And it's so important to us to know which political project we are supporting as well. Anti-racist is not about a lifestyle. It's about to think how to change structural problems. So it is directly connected with the political project that we are supporting. So it's very important to raise awareness on that. But in Brazil right now, the Black religion in Brazil is the evangelical religion. There are a lot of new Pentecostal churches in Brazil, especially in favelas, in poor neighborhoods, places where the state is not present in terms of inclusion. So it's another challenge that you have to deal. There is a church in Brazil that owns a TV station, for example, and of course they control the narratives. In Brazil, there is not a democratic media. The media is controlled by few families, so it means that few families control the narratives in Brazil. So we live this paradox. At the same time, there are these advance of the extreme right. At the same time, public policies are being kept. We have this kind of movements going on. So I think that a moment in time is never linear. So you have all of these movements happening together in Brazil right now. Oh, is that my question?
Yeah, and the second question was about how this changed here, being here in the States, your
Okay.
conversations, is like shaping your conversations about the diaspora, the Black diaspora and academia.
It's interesting now the challenge of being a Brazilian here in the United States. But at the same time, I am in a position of being a professor, so it's good to have this kind of power because I can teach about the authors from Brazil, from Argentina, from Colombia, from Guatemala, from India, Africa, and my students, they are really enjoying the experience. And for me, it's so, um, you know, it's so good to see how all these authors are opening their minds, and they are having the opportunity to embrace different perspectives of the world, because the curricula in the United States is so centered in the United States, even in the race critical theory, even among Black scholars in the United States, so centered in the United States. So for me, it's been a very nice experience. And as a part of the chair that I am now at NYU, I have to organize some public events.
Okay.
And I'm really enjoying this opportunity to organize these public events. The first one was with Ibram Kendi,
Mhm.
who is, I think you know, he's a quite popular in the United States. But the second one was with two Brazilians. So I fought to have two Brazilians. One is a Quilombola woman, Selma de Aldina, um, and she came to at NYU to the event, and the other one was Alessandra Debussy. It was very interesting because Alessandra, she speaks English, but Selma, she didn't. So for me, it was important that that event would be in Portuguese with English interpretation. And we did that. And my students were very excited about this fact because for most of them, it was the first time that he had an interpretation.
Yeah.
The first time. And for the other students, especially the Brazilian students, they were very touched about the fact for the first time they had an event in Portuguese at NYU. And I decided to do that because when US thinkers travel to Brazil, we use interpretation, right? So it's important to establish this kind of movement, but usually, but there were some people, oh, but I don't know if I'm going to attend this event because, there will be interpretation. But it was completely full. People enjoyed the conversation and had the opportunity to hear from Selma in the first person because she is a Quilombola woman. I was speaking about Quilombola woman, but it's important to invite her to talk about the reality of Quilombola people in Brazil. So I'm enjoying the opportunity that here, university like NYU provided to me to bring the perspectives from the South. And the book was published in August, and I was already here, the opportunity to promote the book as well, because I'm living here. So it's being sometimes can be very challenging, but in the other hand, for me, I'm so glad to have the opportunity to do that.
Questions?
We're not done. We have plenty of
We have
questions.
questions,
You're
right?
now open to you.
Yeah, something.
I wanted to ask about how are you like dealing with the different like concepts of race in the US versus in Brazil when you're like teaching your classes and translating your books? Because I know here it's very much follows the like one drop rule where it's like a way broader category of people that are considered people of color, when in Brazil it's like the opposite. It's like way broader category of people that in Brazil would be white and here are not. So how has that like manifested like in your classes and your translations?
Yes, in the class, I bring the perspective from authors, Brazilian authors like Lélia Gonzalez, that in the 80s, she was criticizing what she used to call the epistemological dependence of the global north and the imperialist vision of the United States. So in the 80s, Lélia Gonzalez was doing that. And she coined a very important concept, Americanidade, Americanity, because for her, it was important to us as Black and Indigenous people in Latin America to acknowledge that it was more interesting for us to create a transnational struggle between us instead of looking up to United States and to the global north all the time. So I bring all these authors that decades ago were, refusing these concepts that comes from United States. And it's a very interesting your question because Lélia Gonzalez, she also criticized the concept of Latinidade and Latino, because what means to be Latino? Because people think Latino is a category, a unique category, but there are different possibilities of being Latino. And for Lélia Gonzalez, she was criticizing this category because for her, it was erasing the contributions of Black and Indigenous people in this category. And even though when people say, oh, a lot of Latinos voted for Trump, for example, but which Latinos? You know, of course, in Brazil, there are some Brazilian rich people, and there are Black Brazilians and different kinds of possibilities of being Latino. So, but here in the United States, it's different. I have white students that in Brazil, they are white. And they come here to the United States and people say to them, you are Latinos. And they say, but I don't know what I am. And I say, well, you don't need just to accept the definition of the others, as Toni Morrison used to say, the definition belong for the people who are trying to define us, not to us. So I think it's important to confront that and to say that in our context makes sense to understand that these people are Black or these people are indigenous because we come from a different context. Even though we as Afro-Latinas sometimes in the United States, people can say we are not Black because we are Latinas, and I say, but I'm Afro-Latina. So how come I'm not Black? So it can happen here among Black folks in the United States, and I say, wow, so I am Black, I am Afro-Latina, so I am going to define myself because I come from a different speaking place. So it's been interesting to present all these concepts to my students and actually to give tools to them that they can do that for themselves and they can have argument, they can have basics to think in a different way.
Okay, so can I talk in Portuguese?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, por favor. I'm struggling here.
Eu faço exatamente isso quando eu chego aqui as pessoas não me identificam como preta, não me vejo sendo acolhida pela comunidade negra, que é bem difícil lidar com isso, porque você fica, entre aspas, sem identidade. Você sai de um lugar onde você é criada, nascida e blá 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 como preta, e chega aqui você não é preta. Então isso me fez repensar esse lugar e ter que me refazer em alguns momentos para conseguir saber quem eu sou, modo de dizer, mas é uma realidade. E eu tenho uma outra pergunta que eu gostaria de fazer para você. Um minutinho, gente, fiquei até nervosa agora.
Tá bom.
É assim, em lugar de fala, você aborda como as mulheres negras, que são maioria em muitos contextos ao redor do mundo, têm sido historicamente silenciada e desumanizada. Pensando no papel essencial das mulheres na sociedade, é importante refletir sobre sua contribuição no nível literal, como corpo feminino que gera vida, com a gestão e o parto, sendo experiências únicas. E no nível simbólico, como agente que transforma, que trazem empatia, cuidado e conexão emocional entre estruturas frequentemente desumanizadas. Apesar disso, o orgasmo feminino, por exemplo, ainda é cientificamente pouco compreendido, o que reflete que o quanto o corpo da mulher é invisibilizado. Será que nós, mulheres, temos minimamente a noção desse poder de humanizar o mundo? Essa é uma questão. E mais importante, como podemos nos conscientizar e agir para fortalecer esse poder coletivo, especialmente entre nós, mulheres negras?
Tá, vou responder em português. Primeiro, obrigada pela pergunta. E essa questão da identidade é uma construção mesmo, quando você sai do país, você é estrangeira, e às vezes a gente também é estrangeira no nosso próprio país também, né? Mas quando você sai e ter que lidar com essas outras definições, que bom que hoje você já consegue estar mais consciente de quem você é.
Isso.
Mas eu acho que essas questões todas que você traz na sua pergunta, que muitas mulheres acabam não tendo consciência, justamente porque do nosso lugar social, a gente não teve as oportunidades de estar presente na ciência, estudando a gente mesmo, estudando o corpo feminino. Quantas cientistas vão descobrir mais tarde tantas questões referentes a isso e que não eram colocadas porque estavam sendo estudados somente por homens que não viam a importância de olhar para outras perspectivas, né? Então, e isso acaba, como o mundo ele é apresentado para nós de uma maneira que não nos humaniza, a gente reproduz essa visão sobre nós mesmos. Então, o nosso desafio é poder não só refutar esse mundo que é apresentado, mas também criar, a partir dos nossos lugares sociais, novas possibilidades de existências. Né? Porque não é só sobre reagir à estrutura, mas também, além de reagir, que mundo nós estamos criando para nós a partir de outros lugares, outras epistemologias, outros parâmetros de humanidade. Então, é um caminho para longo, até porque essa estrutura é uma estrutura muito antiga e que nós fomos condicionadas e alienadas de nós mesmos dentro dessa estrutura. E acho que o nosso dever é que cada uma de nós que conseguiu refletir criticamente para além disso, é pensar como que nós coletivamente podemos também contribuir para que outras mulheres possam. Como que a gente pode fazer isso? Às vezes você cria uma instituição, às vezes você tem um coletivo, às vezes fazendo parte de um movimento, como que a gente continua fazendo parte desse movimento de desconstrução e construção de outros mundos. Então, é um processo para a vida toda, mas que seja importante que a gente encontre qual é a melhor forma que a gente vá fazer isso. Então, tem mulheres que vão fazer na academia, tem mulheres que vão fazer no ativismo, tem mulheres que vão fazer, enfim, de diferentes formas. Que a gente possa valorizar essas diferentes formas, não criar hierarquia entre essas diferentes formas, e entender como a gente potencializa todo esse movimento que começou antes de nós, vai continuar depois, para que mais mulheres possam ter consciência de si mesmas e se afastar dessa alienação de nós mesmas que foi construída por toda essa estrutura patriarcal, racista e capitalista.
Eu adorei. Eu acho que o grande que eu pesquei aí é a alienação de nós mesmas. Né? A gente precisa desconstruir isso. Obrigada. Um prazer.
E mais uma pergunta.
Acho que ela tinha levantado a mão.
Aqui, né, no cantinho, né?
Escondida lá.
I don't know if English.
You can, whichever language.
Yeah, okay. So, Djamila, thank you so much for your talk and your sharing all these thoughts. As a human being, especially because I feel very connected to you when we go to this level. And I think this moment we are living now, it's really important that we meet in that place, right? Like, I feel my hands like exactly you in this one. Anyway, I gotta do. I've been writing a series that talk about different movement with different type of abuse relationship, and the main character she's a black woman. And I've been writing and finding very difficult because for me, I've been writing from this perspective of a woman, but I don't have the place of of knowledge for the speak. And even though and finding these places of even like a white woman or brands or black woman, right? So I've been struggling with that. So my question tonight, I want to just share with you like how I would like have people to come to write together, you know what I mean? As a collective to understand, like you say, like teaching and learning, to learn a little bit more from that point of view. There was a moment here that you said that it was a question that you always that we should ask that I didn't understand is that what can I impact in a different perspective in place and you can speak that because I felt so very like connected to that question that
Let me see if I understood. You were writing a book about
I'm
the
writing
reality of
actually
a black
series.
woman.
Yeah, yeah. I'm writing a series that one of the characters is a black
Ah, okay.
yeah. And then I'm also writing a book as well.
Mhm.
So both things. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, I think that there is not a problem when a white woman writes about black woman. For me, the thing is how you are doing that, because it's important to you to have contact with bibliography written by Black women and to have access to this kind of perspectives from Black women. And you are going to write from a different place, but it's important to acknowledge the reality of Black women, even though you're not a Black woman. But for me, the thing is how you're doing that. It's not a problem. Taking place is not about to prohibit people to write about all their realities, but the thing is how you're doing that. Because usually people can write about Black people, can build their careers writing about Blackness, and still be against affirmative action for Black people. For me, this is the thing. So when these people are not really connected with the struggle of Black people, the struggle of indigenous people. So you can be an ally and you can write about, but how you are doing that is the point. So when I say what can you do to impact in a positive way, for me it's like I'm not a trans woman, but I invited a trans woman to write in my collection, and I read about the reality of trans people because I don't want to be the person to impact in a negative way for that reality. So it's important to me to break the ignorance about that.
Sure.
I'm not a lesbian woman, but I'm going to read, I'm going to listening, I'm going to kill the oppressor inside myself, as Audre Lorde used to say, to be able to impact the lives of lesbian women differently. So in this sense that I say, because we don't live isolated in this society. So people say, but I'm not lesbian, I'm not trans, but don't live isolated. And what you say, what you do can impact in a negative way the lives of these people. So what's our responsibility to not do that? To actually take actions in a way to impact differently. So in the sense that I was saying that because as a Black woman, many times people I was being disrespected, and many times people were saying that and they were in silence. So when I asked, I didn't do anything, because I don't know what to do. It's important to do if you're, seeing other people being disrespected, do something. So what are you doing actually to change that? It's not about a beautiful discourse. It's about what actually are you doing. So and you can do it in different ways. You can write about that. You can make visible the work of other people. You can educate yourself, not to reproduce this kind of views and so on.
Thank you, friends. And you are actually you inspired me. So my
Oh,
parents.
thank you.
There was someone
Oh,
here.
shit,
Yeah,
yeah.
she was down. She was here and I was waiting for. I'm not sure
You
what
can
to
answer.
get one from-
Okay.
You can answer in Portuguese, it's fine, but I'd rather ask in English. I am an immigrant. I live here for 30 years in the US. I'm from Brazil. And I've been watching the country, so I see Black women, African American women are the most educated demographic group in this country. Yet we had a female running for president. And women vote for uh, their interest at state level, but at federal level, they voted for them. So I wonder how, in a sense, what I understand is that instead of us, Black women getting respect, we got kind of resentment, in a sense. And I wonder how you see this in a sense of transfer these relations that go back and forth between Brazil and the US. So this is a movement in here that I see it that way. It says slap in the face of Black women. We are the most educated group in this country. And women refuse to vote for Black women. I think mostly because she's Black. I mean, I don't, and yes, so what do you think of this in the perspective of your insights in the future?
Well, I read that most of Black women voted for Kamala, most of Black women, but 97%, right? 92%. So most of Black women voted for her. And if white women didn't vote for her, maybe because identifies with white supremacy because white women, are women but are white, so they can identify themselves with this kind of perspective, and even though they are discriminated, but they are part of a system of domination, which is the white supremacy. Um, and I think that's maybe it's one of the answers, maybe because they are voting for on their privilege as white, because this privilege um, are structured in the society and in Brazil the same way. So maybe, as I said in the example, a poor white person can identify himself with Trump, for example, because he's white, and do not understand that he or uh, their reality is more closer to their black neighbor than a white rich person, but they want to feel superior because the white supremacy brings this kind of sense of superiority. Unless I'm not a black, I am a white, I'm part of the system. And how this kind of discourse mobilizes this feeling in these people that because they want to feel superior. So I think it is one of the answers maybe that made, but actually Hillary Clinton also lost the election. She was a white woman. She lost for Trump, and maybe because people do not, this society is misogynist as well. So it's, Obama, he was elected twice. He's a black man. Maybe the society here in the United States is not ready to have a woman running the world, running the country. So because what explained Hillary Clinton as well. So yes, I think there is this kind of feeling and alienation in a lot of women that we as women are not ready to run a country. We reproduce this kind of ideas because we were raised to believe in that as well. So I think there are a lot of contradictions and internalized oppression as well.
Yeah.
Internalized oppression as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess I'll be moving on. There are more questions, but I don't know if you have that, but if you have a recommendation for the Brazilian community that is here that could supporting, like pushing these publishers to expand their horizons, like what, from your point of view, what has been their excuse? Is it like, oh, there's no demand? Like maybe they just don't have any knowledge of this artist, so do we need to push for them, show them that there is demand, that we need to push that, yes, there is a lot of Black Brazilian authors that, should be publishing here, like if.
For the Brazilian community.
Yeah, the Brazilian community that lives in the US.
Okay.
In that sense of privilege, being
Mhm.
closer to the publishers here, and since you mentioned the challenges of actually publishing here.
Yes, most of the Brazilian community who are living here are white people. And there are, of course, people who comes to work, but there are these rich white Brazilian who comes to study in Ivy League institutions, and sometimes these people, they are not concerned about what's going on in our country. So Brazilian community is so different among them. So there are different Brazilians who comes here. There are the cleaning ladies, but there are these people who lives in the Fifth Avenue in New York City. I did an event at the Brazilian consulate in New York City. There were a lot of different Brazilians there. So cleaning ladies and business women, and sometimes people who have privilege. They are not so concerned about what's going on in our country. And in Brazil, there is this sense of complex of vira-lata that we call that a lot of Brazilians, they are not proud of being Brazilians. Unfortunately, there is this kind of, behavior in some Brazilians. And I think so sad because sometimes I am talking with Brazilian people and American people, and the Brazilian people are the first to criticize our country in front of the Americans, maybe to feel that they belong. And oh no, please don't come to Brazil, it's so violent. Oh, please don't come because Brazil this, Brazil that. So Brazilian people. So I remember I was in New York City in this kind of conversation. I was like, what's people are talking about? And I said, okay, of course, in Brazil there are a lot of problems, a lot of issues. But in Brazil, I don't know if you're aware, there are, maternity leave for women. In the United States, there are no paid maternity leave. Do you know that in Brazil there is a public health system? And people, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Universities.
Yeah, the public universities in Brazil are really public. The concept of public is different. But here, when people say public university, but you have to pay a fee. But in Brazil, I've studied in a public university, and of course, I haven't paid because I pay taxes. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. So in Brazil, anyone is losing their home because they got ill or sick. So, and sometimes people in Brazil, they look up to United States, oh, United States. Because there, United States. Here in Brazil, no, Brazil this. So you have to change the way Brazilian people see themselves. And I think it's the ongoing process. I think the things are changing, but there are still these people that are not proud of being Brazilians and try to fit in. It's fit in is to talk bad about your country or reproduce stereotypes. So it's an ongoing process. So sometimes the conversation inside the Brazilian community can be tough because of all these differences. And Brazilian people actually do not know Brazil. They know a lot of middle class people, rich people in Brazil. They know Miami, they know different countries in Europe, but they don't know, you know, different cities and states in Brazil. So it's an ongoing process. And I think that's why sometimes we cannot have this kind of conversation, people here helping us. On the other hand, hopefully, there are these Brazilians who are professors here, invited me to come and putting my book in their bibliographies and buying the books and giving to their American friends. On the other hand, there is this sense of a community with other parts of the community as well. People who actually are trying to bring a different Brazil to the United States.
Other questions?
Hi, Djamila. Oi, Djamila. Portuguese. I never know if I need to talk in English or Portuguese because my subject here is exactly that. I am art historian and curator, and I am here working about the absence of Black Brazilian artists in the international discussion about Afro-diasporic art history. And of course, the centrality of that discussion is made from United States to United States. Many times people forgot we are the biggest Black country outside the African continent. Many times when I am talking about that here, people say, "Yeah, really." One of the points in my research now is how one of the problems of that discussion resides in a type of a North American expectation about what the being Black in Brazil means. So, for example, we never have in exhibitions here in the United States Brazilian artists. But when you have Black Brazilian artists, but when you have, it's always in the same key, in a essentialized way. For example, Black artists from the past, or Black artists who fit in an idea of primitive, or the approaches is always about Bahia, Orishas, transcendence. My question is, that's the way how I feel the field here about diaspora. It's like traditionally we are in the past. We never exist in the actually. So my question is, how you felt in your field, this not just the centrality of United States in the discussion, but at the same time, how you see the way how North American people read the Brazilian thinkers, read a traditional Black Brazilian intellectuals. How you think this is presence or absence here?
I think it's the same way you just said. There is a expectation that they want us to accomplish. You know, it's so it's so based on stereotype most of the time or in certain categories. So and sometimes I feel that they even can know how to deal with us when we break this kind of expectations. They don't know how to deal. So I don't know what to do with this woman because she's completely different of what I expecting from. So I feel all the time this kind of feelings, and sometimes I feel that they are going to isolate me somehow because they don't know how to deal with me. Because we bring uncomfortable truths, and they are not ready most of the times to deal with these uncomfortable truths that we are bringing, that you just brilliant said. So Brazilian Black artists are so different among them, and people don't know about that. It's all the time about Salvador. It's not only Bahia, because Bahia, and I was in Spelman College, it was amazing, the experience there, but they have a program. They take the students to Salvador for 15 days, only to Salvador all the time. Salvador is so amazing. I say, yes, it's good. I'm so glad that you are coming to Salvador, but it's important to know that there are Black people, in every state of the country with different cultures and language and accents and ways of being. So I think they only can imagine Black people from Salvador sometimes and this kind of image. So I feel the same, and most of the time, I don't know how to deal with Djamila. So, oh my God, they even sometimes talk to me because they don't like what we have to say, and they do not want to process these uncomfortable truths that we are bringing to them. Then I accept that, yes, if the way it is, let's do the work, because I'm not going to fit in any expectation about myself. And it was interesting because I was in an event with some US thinkers, and a guy asked me, a Black guy, American, how come they speak English? And I'm like, oh yeah, I struggle a lot sometimes, because but I managed to do that. Oh wow, how come you are published by Universe Press? I am not published by Universe Press. And I said, yes, anyone with your opinion. But I was so surprised about this tag, but I am American and I'm not published by Yale. And I was like, oh yeah. Go to therapy.
It's that replacement.
It's interesting how for them, because even though Black people from United States, they are not, they use it to deal with Black people from Brazil. They deal with white people. So they know white rich people, curator white rich people from Brazil who invited them to go to Brazil, to come to Brazil. And then when they come to Brazil, they stay in a white bubble with rich bubble in Brazil. They don't know about the Afro-Brazilian. So when they meet a Brazilian here, as you as a curator studying for them, it's like, wow, a Black Brazilian here asking this question and question the North American way. to see this issue, you know, so they are still learning to deal with that.
Thank you. And thank you for your work.
Hi, I'm a big fan of you. I'm Brazilian. I'm from Fortaleza.
Ah,
specifically
Fortaleza.
North.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had a kind of a challenge like breaking your industry, because I'm a film producer and in Brazil, as a white man, like I have really big struggle like breaking into the business, So I'm wondering, like you as a writer, like if you face any kind of challenge, like breaking, like the publishing industry. I don't know how was that. If you have any kind of experience.
Well, in your field, I think it's can be more complicated because it needs too much more money to do that, to produce your own films and then to pay for distribution. It can be so expensive to have the movies in a commercial level. I follow some discussions with some Black directors, female directors as well, and we have this kind of conversation. I'm learning uh, more about this industry, so it can be very challenging to have the opportunity to actually have the money to do your film. So I think for me it's very important the economic empowerment of women. I think you should talk more about that and how actually we should work together more, supporting financially the work of other women. I think it's so important to do that. So when I find some rich woman who says, "Oh, I want to help," okay, you can give money to us. Give money. It's important. Let's create this kind of because this kind of relationship, and then maybe you can find woman who can do that. So if we are actually now filming a documentary about my life, and we had to support most of the parts of it. And now we have a producer in Brazil, but it was so difficult to us. So what we did, we decided to invite rich people to dinners and say, yes, do you want support? Yes, we need money to do that. So I'd love to help. Okay, you can do that and go to the, knock the doors of CEOs, companies, and present the project. So we did that, but before we had to afford most of the documentary, and then now we got some kind of financial support. I think you have to do that. You cannot be shy to do that and to invite people to be part, especially people who really can afford or can connect to you with people who can afford that.
There was a question, please?
Andrés, I'm not Brazilian, but I've been following you for such a long time, so I'm reporting I can work here. I host an annual Black History Month book festival, and we feature authors from all over the world. And my question is, I have been reaching out to Brazilian writers for years with very little feedback, and it has been so challenging because it's much easier to get from the continent of Africa, from diaspora that are in Europe, Australia, but I have so much trouble with like Colombia and Brazil. Is there any way to break through? I've tried, and out to publishers, hey, we're hosting this festival, we want to, nothing, I get nothing every single year, so if you have any advice. And also, I pushed for you to do the tour here. I've been bothering you on Instagram. She probably doesn't see it, but come to LA. Please come to LA. So I'm very happy to welcome you here.
And what is the name of?
Oh, it's called the Lifted Literary Festival.
Here in Los Angeles?
Yes, is it called the Lifted Literary?
Oh, wow.
Last year we hosted 35 Black authors. This year we'll have 400.
Wow. Great. Wow, great. Well, I guess maybe because of the language can be a barrier. Most of these Black authors, they didn't speak English. So they don't feel comfortable to be part of because you need a translator maybe. And maybe can be that if you can provide a translator, have translation. Most of the Black authors in Brazil do not speak English. And they feel, I don't know, uncomfortable maybe to come and not be able to explain themselves. Maybe can be that, exactly, I don't know. So if you have some kind of, because in Africa, for example, many countries people speak English.
Yeah.
In Africa and in Brazil, most of the population do not speak English. Maybe can be that have, I don't know, try to create some kind of environment that these people can come, even though without speaking English.
Maybe do interviews, packages be posted and translated.
Yeah.
And we have a Spanish and Portuguese department here. And I'm sure many of those students would be very interested in helping you with translation.
Cause it's
I'm going to speak for a department, I don't know. But since I'm on the same dais, I feel I can make the point that we have actually a lot of students who, I'm the director of the Brazil Center, we have a lot of students who speak Portuguese, travel, do research in Brazil and so on, who would be delighted. So get in touch.
Yeah, I'm open. Anybody can send me their information.
Yeah, get in touch with us. We're
Yeah.
we're happy to do that. Yeah, Judith, Professor.
I was just going to say thank you for bringing a rainbow in many respects.
Yeah.
You might not be able to see it better over here. Pull back.
Oh, yes, now I saw.
Yeah, over there, you can't see it right here. There you go. Well, let's have one more question and then, or Djamila. How about you with the blue arm?
Taki, earlier you mentioned the experience.
Well, we're having a question here.
Anna, question here.
And then you're the last.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see you. You mentioned about the experience Black women are sharing as a group. So I was just curious. I know mine, but based on your living here and teaching, what would you say is like the main similarity or difference as when it comes to the experience of being a Black woman here or being a Black woman in Brazil?
Well, being a Black woman in Brazil sometimes can feel that we are foreign, even in our own country, especially if you do not are in the places that the Brazilian society expects us to be. So can be sometimes our challenge in Brazil, especially because I was raised in a very political family and I was raised to go to the social movements and since I was a kid, I knew about racism in Brazil. It's different from a lot of Black families in Brazil. So it was difficult. I was at 8 years old, I was playing chess and going with my father meetings in the Communist Party. So since I was a kid, it was difficult to deal because all the time people, oh, why is she playing chess? She should do this and do that. So I have to learn how to deal with the racist expectations in Brazil since I was a kid. But when I grew up, you know, for me it was time to time more easier to understand that and to accept myself the way I am because a lot of times I feel like I don't belong here, I don't belong there. So even the Black community in Brazil sometimes are not Black enough because they are studying philosophy and this and that. But now, because in Brazil, I am a popular writer in Brazil, now it's different because I'm in a place that, a visible place. So it's different to me today when people approach me. But on the other hand, in the beginning, when I started writing my book, so it's very difficult to deal with the fact of being visible because a lot of attacks, a lot of aggressive behaviors from people on the internet or social media, people who, even though from the left wing, people who do not accept the fact that a dark-skinned Black woman is in this kind of place. So I have to learn how to deal with the fact of being visible. So today for me, it's a nice play. Today I know how to deal with that, but it was a process for me. It was a hard process actually, many times to not, fight with people all the time. And say I'm not going to answer these. In the beginning, it was very difficult to me because, when I released this book in 2017, a lot of white men wrote pieces in big newspapers saying a lot of bullshit because I was expecting a very honest discussion, a quality discussion, but because I'm a Black woman, they were thinking I didn't deserve that because you can criticize the book, but bring, arguments, bases. It's not a problem. I study philosophy. It's not a problem for me. Um, when people criticize, I like to share ideas, but the fact is, people were writing things like lugar de fala, speaking place is bullshit. Lugar de fala is nonsense. So this is not an argument. This is not a quality discussion. So I have to deal with this fact that Djamila, you cannot answer this kind of thing because this is distraction. Because these people, they are not concerned about a good discussion. So move on and do a different thing. So in the beginning was it, but today in Brazil, I'm very, I don't have any problem of being myself in Brazil anymore. I'm 44 years old, so anymore I don't have. But here in the United States, the thing is, I don't have either. So, and the thing is, people actually are not ready for that, especially when you are a Brazilian. So I don't know, people expect you to be nice and happy all the time. And so I'm not happy. At the same time that I'm a very open person, there are times that I want to be alone and people no, but let's party. Brazilian people like to party. Yeah, no, I don't like to party. I'm 44 years old. I like to sit and drink a wine, and this is my kind of party. So I'm good. And so I have to do different kinds of expectations here, I guess. I can meet a lot of Black women in the department, and it's good in Brazil. I don't meet too much women like me here. I can meet more Black women, but again, Black women from US who have all these images from Brazil. Sometimes they think that we are going to steal their husbands. It's ridiculous. And I was like, so I don't know, I'm not going to present you to my husband, these kind of things, this sexualized view on Brazilian women. So so difficult to deal with that, especially when you are a woman. So you're not concerned about men, others people at all. You're just here doing your work. But I try not to be so affected by that, and I know who I am. I'm not here to be the person you want me to be, so I know who I am. So today for me it's a comfort place, but I had to work a lot to be in this place. A lot of therapy, a lot of conversations with elder women, a lot of support from the other people to understand myself and to feel comfortable in my own skin. But it was a hard process.
We have
We have the final question in the back.
that's you.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dorothy Faye Hurdle. I'm a Master of Public Policy student here at UCLA's Luskin School of Public Affairs. I too am 44 and Black, and I'm from, the US. And so time holds like distinctive markers, right? So like what we're wearing today might not be what people wore 10 or 50 years ago. And I'm thinking about this book, this essay that you're here to discuss with us. Can you give us a pervasive example of how American Black exceptionalism, kind of as this internalized micro ideology, functions in Sao Paulo? So if you could give us like an example of how what I guess the group of people that I belong to here, like as an African American, like a Black person here in the US, how does that impact people in Sao Paulo in like one example that you can share with us?
I think that it's important to people here in the US, especially Black people in the US, to be more, I don't know, open to what we have to teach actually, because I think that usually people don't think you have things to teach. American people always want to teach us all the time. And they don't think that they have more to learn from different realities and different people, especially from people in Brazil. And in São Paulo, for example, there is different kinds of Black organizations in São Paulo, Black feminist organizations in São Paulo, doing incredible work there. But usually people are not so open to know about that. And even though when they come to Brazil, because there are some Black intellectuals that often come to Brazil, they visit these kind of organizations, maybe they can hold talks with some Black Brazilians, but that's it. When they come to the United States, I don't feel that actually they are bringing the experiences that they had in São Paulo or in Salvador or in Rio de Janeiro here. So in Brazil, it's so common. People from the United States are coming and everybody, wow. And that thing, and I say, wow, you are not doing that for us here in Brazil, for the Brazilians, but from United States, let's do everything. But even though this kind of relations, these people are coming to Brazil often, I don't feel they are really actually understand Brazil. Angela Davis, she went to Brazil in 2015 and she said, why do you need me here if you have Lélia Gonzalez? And everybody was like, oh yeah, it's right. But on the other hand, I hope that Angela Davis can translate Lélia Gonzalez here, because it's not only about to say, I agree with her, I was very happy when she said that in Brazil. I was like, so, but it was necessary a woman from the United States to come here and say that to you, to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So this is the thing again. And again, I hope that all these women that are being translated into Portuguese and having a lot of success in Brazil can bring all these authors here and what they are learning from Brazil here. And I miss that. So when I arrived here, I thought that people would know more because of Angela Davis, Patricia Nicole is a person who I love. She supports my work. And I was one of the first was there, you have to read more Brazilians. And she did that. Now she's writing about Brazilian women in her books. And she comes to Brazil often, and it's great. But I hope that actually they can teach here about these women. And I don't feel that these people are doing that, although we love them, we admire them, but I think it's important to them because they are having contacts now with a lot of Brazilian women and Black Brazilian women.